My name is Thea Exton. I'm 34, and last Thanksgiving, my father raised his glass in front of 14 family members and told everyone I was the only person at the table who hadn't figured out how to be an adult. I didn't yell. I didn't leave. I picked up my fork, took a bite of turkey, and asked my brother-in-law one question. His fork hit the china so hard the gravy boat shook. 6 seconds of silence, the smell of sage and roasted skin still hanging in the air like it hadn't gotten the memo that dinner was over. What my father didn't know, what nobody at that table knew, was that I'd been carrying a piece of paper in my purse for 3 weeks. A public record. The kind anyone could find if they knew where to look. And I knew where to look. Before I take you back to the beginning, please take a moment to like and subscribe. And if you'd like, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to October, 3 weeks before the turkey hit the table. I lived on Birch Street, 2nd floor, apartment 2B. The carpet was older than me, and the hot water took its time in the mornings, but the kitchen window faced west, and every afternoon around 4:30, the sun came through and turned the linoleum gold. My cat Copper liked to sit on the windowsill during that half hour, his orange fur lit up like a little furnace. I'd pour my second coffee and stand there watching him watch the parking lot like it was a nature documentary. I worked at Ridgeline Title Services, a small title company off Route 9, between a dental office and a place that sold discount tires. My job was examining property records, liens, deeds, easements, encumbrances. I checked every document before a real estate closing to make sure the title was clean. It wasn't glamorous. Nobody talked about it at parties, but I was good at it, and the people who understood what I did respected it. My boyfriend Nolan was building me a bookshelf that month. He was a carpenter, the real kind, not the YouTube kind, and he'd found some reclaimed oak from a barn demolition 2 counties over. He measured twice, cut once. I like that about him. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. He just showed up with sawdust on his jeans and a level in his back pocket and built things that held. My apartment was clean, paid for on time, and mine. I had a 900 credit score, a retirement account I'd been feeding since 25, and a cat who purred when I came home. By most standards, I was doing fine. By Gerald's standards, I was a cautionary tale. Gerald is my father. I should probably call him Dad, but somewhere around 30 I stopped, at least in my own head. He'd never been inside this apartment. Not once in 2 years. When I moved in, I texted him the address. He wrote back, "How much is rent?" I told him. He wrote, "That's a car payment on a real house." That was the last time we discussed where I lived. He had a different standard for my sister. Gerald Exton built houses for 31 years, started as a framer, ended as the owner of a 4-man crew that put up modular homes across the county. He retired at 60 with 2 bad knees, a paid-off mortgage, and the unshakable belief that owning property was the single defining act of adulthood. If you had a deed with your name on it, you were somebody. If you didn't, you were still becoming. He never said it that plainly. He didn't have to. It came through in how he moved through the world, who he listened to, who he interrupted, who he toasted at the dinner table. My sister Marlene got the toasts. At my 30th birthday, Gerald stood up in a restaurant with 9 people watching and said, "Maybe by 35 you'll have a front door that's actually yours." He smiled when he said it, like it was a joke. Nobody laughed, but nobody corrected him either. Marlene looked at her plate with a little pursed lip expression I'd learned to read by then. Not sympathy, not cruelty, something in between. Pity shaped like concern. When I signed my lease on Birch Street, I invited Gerald to a small housewarming. He declined. "That's not a house, Thea. That's a lease." He said it the way a doctor might say, "That's not a cure, that's a bandage." Like he was doing me a favor by not pretending. The year before this story starts, Gerald pulled $80,000 from the family trust our grandmother Ruth had set up. He gave it all to Marlene. Every cent. She earned it, he told me over the phone, casual as weather. She paid off her house. I remember standing in my kitchen when he said that. Copper weaving between my ankles, the late sun making its usual gold square on the floor. $80,000. From a trust my grandmother built for both of us. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, because I didn't have the receipts yet. But I remember the sound of his voice. Certain, final, like a hammer driving a nail flush. Gerald always sounded like that. Like the wood never had a say. Marlene and Craig lived in a white colonial on Orchard Lane, the kind of street where every lawn looked like it had a personal trainer. 4 bedrooms, a red front door, a sugar maple turning gold every October, like it was contractually obligated. 2-car garage, a porch swing that didn't squeak, and window boxes Marlene planted with something seasonal every 6 weeks. It looked like the house in every insurance commercial. Safe, earned, permanent. Craig was a sales manager at a building supply company. Good handshake, good teeth, the kind of man who called everyone buddy and remembered your kid's name. Gerald loved Craig. Craig had a mortgage, or used to, and a garage and opinions about lawnmower brands. Craig fit the blueprint. Sunday brunches at the Colonial were a ritual. Marlene set the table with linen napkins and a pitcher of fresh juice. Her 2 kids, Emma, 11, and Jake, 8, sat straight and said, "Please." Craig poured Gerald's wine before Gerald had to ask, and Gerald would lean back and say something like, "This is what a family should look like," while glancing in my general direction. I noticed things at those brunches. Small things. Craig refilling Gerald's glass a beat too fast, like he was servicing a client. Marlene mentioning our house a little too often, the way someone keeps touching a ring to make sure it's still there. And one Sunday in September, I saw a bank envelope on the kitchen counter. Return address from their mortgage lender. Marlene saw me see it. She flipped it face down without breaking her sentence about the new backsplash. I didn't think much of it then. People get mail from their bank. But I filed it somewhere in the back of my head the way I filed everything. Quietly, precisely, without knowing yet what folder it belonged in. I brought a bottle of wine to those brunches. Marlene always said the same thing when I arrived. "You should let Nolan build you some shelves. At least your apartment will look like someone lives there." She'd say it with a half smile, like she was helping. Marlene was good at that, shaping a knife to look like a favor. The office at Ridgeline Title smelled like toner and old coffee, and the fluorescent lights gave everything a faint hum, like the building itself was thinking. I didn't mind it. Some people need corner offices and skyline views. I needed clean data and a second monitor. Diane Prescott had the desk across from mine. 52, silver-streaked hair she kept in a low bun, reading glasses on a beaded chain she'd made herself. She'd been examining titles for 22 years and still caught errors I walked right past. She brought me coffee every morning, not because I asked, but because she decided I was hers to look after somewhere around my second week. "You catch things I miss," she told me once, sliding a mug across the partition. "And I've been doing this 22 years. That's not nothing, Thea." I liked being good at something that mattered quietly. Nobody threw a parade for a clean title search, but every family that moved into a house without a hidden lien owed something to the person who'd read every page before closing day. That was enough for me. It was a Tuesday in early October when I was running batch searches, routine, a stack of about 60 filings to verify against county records. Line after line, deed of trust, assignment, reconveyance, release. The rhythm of it was almost meditative, like sorting beads by color. Then I hit line 12. Holt, Craig A. and Marlene E. deed of trust. Refinance. $340,000. Recorded August 14th. I read it again. I read it a third time. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. August 14th. That was 3 months after Marlene stood in Gerald's living room and announced she'd paid off her mortgage. 3 months after Gerald pulled $80,000 from the trust and handed it over like a trophy. Paid off. And then refinanced. For $340,000. I closed the file. I finished my coffee. I drove home, fed Copper, and sat on the couch without turning on the television. Just sat there, in the apartment my father had never visited, with a number ringing in my head like a bell someone forgot to stop. $340,000. I didn't sleep well that night. Copper did. Curled at the foot of the bed like a comma, unbothered by arithmetic. I envied him. 2 days later, on my lunch break, I pulled up the county recorder's website. This wasn't snooping. This was my job. Or a version of it. Public records are public for a reason. Anyone with an internet connection and a last name can search them. I'd done it 10,000 times for strangers. Now I was doing it for a name I knew. The filing was clean and clear. Deed of trust, recorded August 14th. Lender, Pacific Ridge Mortgage. Borrowers, Craig A. Holt and Marlene E. Holt. Principal amount, $340,000. Cash out refinance. Not a rate in term. That distinction mattered. A rate in term refinance means you're adjusting your interest rate. A cash out means you're pulling equity from the house. You're borrowing against what you own because you need the money. I sat in the parking lot behind the office, sunlight cutting through the blinds of my car in thin yellow lines. I did the math on my phone's calculator, even though I'd already done it in my head. Marlene's original mortgage was roughly $260,000. She told Gerald she'd paid it off. Gerald gave her $80,000 from the trust. The last piece, he called it. Proud as a man hanging the final shingle on a roof he'd built himself. Marlene accepted it, accepted the praise, accepted the Sunday toasts, accepted the title of the daughter who figured it out. 3 months later, she refinanced for $340,000. More than the original mortgage, which meant the $80,000 Gerald gave her never went to the mortgage at all. It went somewhere else. And then, she and Craig borrowed even more. I closed my laptop. The parking lot was empty. A sparrow landed on the hood of my car, looked at me through the windshield like it had a question, and flew off. I didn't call Gerald. I didn't call Marlene. I sat with the math the way you sit with a bruise, pressing it gently, testing how deep it went. My sister was a liar, and my father had built a pedestal for her out of money that was supposed to be mine too. Gerald called on a Saturday morning, the kind of call that started with listen and ended with instructions. He was hosting Thanksgiving at Marlene's house this year. Or rather, Marlene was hosting, and Gerald was directing. "She's earned the right to host," he said, like it was a promotion. "I'll be making an announcement, something about the future, about the house." I held the phone away from my ear for a second, then brought it back. "What kind of announcement?" "Family business, Thea. You'll hear it with everyone else." Marlene's voice came through on speaker, bright and rehearsed. "It's going to be a special evening, Thea. You should bring Nolan, if he owns a tie." I set the phone on the counter and stared at it like it might explain itself. Gerald was updating his estate plan. He was going to stand in Marlene's dining room, in front of the whole family, and announce that the house, Gerald's house, the one he'd built with his own hands, would go to Marlene. The daughter who paid off her mortgage, the daughter who earned it. Nolan came out of the bathroom toweling his hair. He looked at my face and stopped. "You okay?" "No, but I'm going." He sat down across from me. Didn't push, didn't fix. Just waited. That was Nolan. He understood that some silences needed to breathe before you filled them. I thought about calling Gerald back, telling him everything, the refinance, the public record, the math that didn't add up. But I knew how that would go. He'd call Marlene. She'd cry. He'd believe her tears over my numbers. And then the phone call would become the problem, not the lie. That evening, I found out from Ruth that Marlene had called her separately, inviting her to come early on Thanksgiving. Getting to her first, shaping the narrative before anyone else could. 3 weeks until Thanksgiving. I had a public record in my desk at work, a patient boyfriend building me a bookshelf, and a question I hadn't decided whether to ask yet. Gerald's last words on that call hung in my kitchen like smoke. "This is a family dinner, Thea. Try to act like you belong at the table." I belonged. I just hadn't proved it yet. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't hack into anyone's email. I didn't do anything I hadn't done 1,000 times at my desk between 9 and 5. I read public records. The county recorder's office had everything filed and indexed, neat as a hymnal. Deed of trust, new lender, new terms, closing date, August 12th, recorded August 14th. Cash out refinance. The document was 16 pages long, and I read every one on my lunch break, eating a turkey sandwich without tasting it. Cash out. That phrase kept landing differently each time I turned it over. When you refinance rate and term, you're adjusting the interest. When you cash out, you're pulling money from the equity. You're selling your future to pay for your present. People do it for renovations, for medical bills, for college tuition, or for a failing business. Craig's business, a small building supply store he'd opened 2 years earlier, had filed for dissolution 10 months ago. I found that on the Secretary of State's website. Another public record. Another piece of the puzzle sitting in plain sight, waiting for someone to bother looking. I mentioned it to Diane without using names. "Hypothetically," I said, leaning against her partition, "if someone paid off a mortgage and then did a cash-out refi 3 months later for more than the original balance, what would that tell you?" Diane took off her reading glasses and looked at me like I'd asked what 2 + 2 was. "People refinance for 2 reasons, hun, opportunity or desperation, and opportunity doesn't usually come with a closed business." That evening, I printed the refinance filing. 1 copy. The printer in the back office took its time, page by page, the warm paper sliding into the tray with a rhythm like a slow heartbeat. I stapled it, folded it into thirds, and put it in a plain white envelope. I didn't write anyone's name on the outside. I put it in my desk drawer at work, under a box of paper clips and a packet of Earl Grey I kept for long afternoons. Then I drove home, watched Copper chase a moth across the living room, and went to bed with the overhead light still on. I forgot to turn it off. My brain was already somewhere else, doing math in the dark. Ruth Exton's kitchen was the size of a postage stamp, and she liked it that way. "Everything I need is within arm's reach," she said once. "That's not small, that's efficient." She was 78, sharp as a box cutter, and she made tea the old way. Kettle on the stove, loose leaves in a pot, no bags, no shortcuts. I drove out to see her the following Saturday, not to tell her about the refinance. I wasn't ready for that. I just needed to sit across from someone who looked at me without measuring. She poured Earl Grey into 2 cups with hand-painted violets on the rims, set a plate of ginger cookies between us, and asked about Nolan, then about work, then about Copper. She did not ask about Gerald. She never did unless I started. "Grandma," I said, cupping the tea with both hands, "did you know Dad's changing his will?" Ruth set her cup down. A single, clean motion, the saucer barely clinking. She was quiet for a moment. Not the confused kind of quiet. The organizing kind. "Your father's been making announcements his whole life," she said. "Most of them he regrets by February." She looked out the window. The garden was done for the season, just bare beds and a bird bath with a leaf floating in it. "Your grandfather was the same," she said. "Did I ever tell you about Patricia?" Patricia was Gerald's younger sister, my great-aunt. I knew almost nothing about her. "She left this town at 25, Ruth said. Your grandfather decided Gerald was the responsible one. Patricia was the dreamer. So everything, the house, the savings, the trust I'd started, he wanted it all funneled to Gerald. I fought him on it. But by the time I won that fight, Patricia was gone. Moved to New Mexico. Married a potter. Never came back for Christmas. She looked at me. I watched it happen once, Thea. I won't watch it happen again. I didn't tell her about the refinance. Not yet. But I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Small, warm, the skin thin as paper but the grip still sure. Your grandfather built this table for 6, Ruth said. He only ever set 5 places. I drove home with that sentence sitting on the passenger seat like a living thing. There are things you know in your gut before your brain agrees to look at the evidence. This was one of those. I sat in my car in the Ridgeline parking lot the next Monday, lunch untouched on the passenger seat, and rebuilt the timeline on the back of a gas receipt. March. Gerald pulls $80,000 from the family trust, gives it to Marlene. The last piece, he says. She's paid off her house. May. Marlene announces at Sunday brunch, casually, between mimosas and a frittata, that the mortgage is done. Gerald tears up, literally. The man who hadn't cried at his own retirement dinner wiped his eyes with a napkin and said, "That's my girl." August. Cash out refinance. $340,000. New lender. New terms. More debt than the original mortgage. The math wasn't complicated. If Marlene had used the $80,000 to pay off the mortgage in March, there would be no mortgage to refinance in August. You can't refinance a debt that doesn't exist, which meant the $80,000 never went to the mortgage. It went to Craig's store, or their credit cards, or somewhere else entirely. And then, with the mortgage still intact, they refinanced for an even larger amount, pulling equity to cover whatever hole they'd dug. $80,000 of our grandmother's trust. Gone. Not into a mortgage, into a story. And then it got worse. I called Ruth that evening, keeping my voice even. Grandma, when you set up the trust, how is it divided? Equally, she said. $60,000 for you, $60,000 for Marlene. That's what I filed with the attorney. And Dad, as trustee, he pulled 80? Silence, the kind that has a temperature. He did what? Ruth didn't yell. Ruth never yelled. But her voice dropped into a register I'd only heard once before, when a contractor had tried to overcharge her for a roof repair. I set that money aside for both of you. Both. I sat in the dark of my apartment with the phone pressed to my ear, rain tapping the kitchen window, the parking lot lights flickering their orange pulse below. Ruth's breathing was steady, but I could hear the anger underneath it, banked like coals. 80,000. He'd taken my half and Marlene's half and 20,000 more, and handed the whole pile to the daughter who told him what he wanted to hear. Nolan came over on Wednesday with the finished shelf pieces in the bed of his truck. He carried them up the stairs one at a time, 2 long oak boards, sanded smooth, the grain running through them like rivers on a map. He didn't talk while he worked. Just measured, marked, drilled, and mounted, pausing every few minutes to step back and sight along the edge with one eye closed, like a man reading a horizon. I held the boards when he needed me to, handed him screws. Copper sat on the kitchen counter watching the whole operation with the expression of a building inspector who hadn't been bribed yet. When the shelf was up, Nolan stepped back, tilted his head, and said, "That'll hold." I put the first book on it, a dog-eared paperback about the history of covered bridges I'd found at a yard sale. Then I stepped back too. It was a small thing, that shelf, 2 planks of reclaimed oak on a rented wall. But it was mine, and someone I loved had built it, and it would hold whatever I put on it. "Where do you want the top shelf?" Nolan asked, already measuring for a second one. "Eye level Or reach level? Eye level, I said. I'm done reaching for things that weren't meant for me. He looked at me. I hadn't meant it to come out like that, but it did, and I let it stand. Later, over leftover soup on the couch, I told him, not everything, just the shape of it. My sister didn't pay off her house. She refinanced it, for more than it was worth. And the $80,000 my dad gave her from the trust, it never went to the mortgage. Nolan held his spoon halfway to his mouth, then set it back in the bowl. He was quiet for a long time. Are you going to tell your dad? I don't know yet. He nodded. He didn't say, you should, or you shouldn't. He finished his soup, put the bowl in the sink, and came back with a beer for himself and a glass of water for me. Then he said, whatever you decide, I'll be there, but I won't wear a tie. Copper jumped onto the new shelf, sniffed the covered bridge book, and settled in like he'd been paying rent there all along. Marlene called me on a Tuesday evening, 10 days before Thanksgiving. Her voice had that coded quality, smooth on the outside, instructions underneath. I'm doing the turkey, the sides, the pies, she said. You can handle a salad, right? A salad. The simplest dish at the table. The one you assign to the person you don't trust with anything that matters. Sure, I said. I'll bring a salad. Great. Something green. Nothing too adventurous. Then she shifted gears, and the coding got thicker. Dad's really excited about the announcement. He's been talking to his lawyer. Something about the house, the trust. I think it's going to be really meaningful. I let the word hang there. Meaningful. A word that meant nothing and everything, depending on which side of the table you were sitting on. Did he talk to Grandma Ruth about the trust? I asked, keeping my voice level. Since it's her trust. 1 second of silence. 1. But I heard it. That's between Dad and his attorney, Marlene said. Quick. Smooth. A door closing before I could look through it. So Ruth hadn't been consulted. The woman who had set up the trust, who had signed the documents, whose money it was, nobody had asked her permission. Gerald had moved the money. Gerald was changing the will, and Ruth was supposed to sit at the table and smile about it, same as me. Marlene finished the call the way she finished every conversation where she wanted the last word. And Thea, please don't make this awkward. You know how Dad gets. Don't make this awkward. 4 words that meant, sit down, eat your salad, and let it happen. Don't be the reason the evening goes wrong. Don't be the difficult one. Don't be you. I said goodbye and set the phone on the counter. Copper jumped up next to it, and I scratched behind his ear while the apartment got darker around me. Marlene had said, you should bring Nolan during Gerald's call. And now she'd added, and Thea? Please don't make this awkward. Framing the battlefield before the first shot. If I said anything at Thanksgiving, I'd be the one who ruined it. Not Gerald, who slandered me over dinner. Not Marlene, who lied about her mortgage. Me. The one who couldn't keep quiet. She told me not to make it awkward. What she meant was, sit there, eat your salad, and let them take what's left. If you've ever sat at a family table and felt like the guest instead of the family, you know exactly what this felt like. And if you're still here listening, I'm guessing you've been at that table too. If this story is hitting close to home, take a second to hit subscribe. I think the next part is going to matter to you. And leave a comment. What would you have done with $340,000 worth of the truth and a Thanksgiving 2 weeks away? The next morning, I called Ruth. I didn't plan to. My hand just picked up the phone while I was drinking my coffee, like it had made the decision for me. Grandma, I need to ask you something about the trust. Ask. You said it was $60,000 each. For me and Marlene? Did Dad ever tell you how much he withdrew? He told me he withdrew Marlene's share. $60,000. Her voice was careful. He said she needed it for the mortgage, the last piece. He took $80. The line went quiet. I heard her kitchen clock ticking through the phone, that old wooden one with the pendulum that hadn't kept accurate time in a decade but still swung. 80, she repeated. 60 from Marlene's portion, 20 from mine, or from the general fund. Either way, more than Marlene's share, and he never told you. I heard her set something down. A teacup, maybe. A precise, deliberate sound, like a period at the end of a sentence. I'm coming to Thanksgiving, Ruth said. Grandma, you don't have to. I'm not doing it for you, honey. I'm doing it for me. That was my money he moved. Mine. I sat in an attorney's office, and I signed those papers, and I divided it fairly. And my own son went behind my back and helped himself to 20,000 more than he was authorized to take. Her voice hadn't risen. If anything, it had gotten quieter. That was the thing about Ruth. The angrier she got, the softer she spoke, until you had to lean in to hear her, and by then the words were already under your skin. I wasn't going to come, she said. My hip's been giving me trouble and it's a long drive. But I'll be there, Thea, and when your father makes his announcement about the house and the will and whatever grand speech he's rehearsing in his bathroom mirror, I'll be sitting right there, because that trust has my name on the first page, not his. I hung up and stood in my kitchen, copper winding between my ankles. Something had shifted. Ruth wasn't coming to Thanksgiving as a grandmother. She was coming as the woman whose money had been taken without her consent. Gerald had two problems now. He just didn't know about either of them yet. Gerald called me on the Monday before Thanksgiving, not to invite me. That was already settled. To instruct me. I need you to understand something, he said, the way he might tell a subcontractor to redo the grout. Thursday is about family. It's about celebrating what we've built, and I don't want any attitude from you. I leaned against my kitchen counter and watched a squirrel cross the power line outside my window, balancing with its tail like a tightrope walker who'd been doing this too long to be impressed. What attitude, Dad? You know what I mean. The sighing. The looking at your phone. Your sister worked hard for what she has. The least you can do is be happy for her. The least I could do. Gerald loved that phrase. It was his way of setting the ceiling before you'd even entered the room. The least you can do is show up. The least you can do is smile. The least you can do is pretend. And Thea, he continued, I'm going to say a few words at dinner. About the house. About the future. I want you to be gracious about it. Gracious. He wanted me to sit in Marlene's dining room on Marlene's china, eating Marlene's turkey, and smile while he announced that everything, his house, the trust, the family legacy, was going to the daughter who'd earned it, and the daughter who hadn't would bring the salad and keep her mouth shut. I closed my eyes. I wanted to say, she didn't earn it. She lied for it. Your 80,000 is gone and her mortgage is bigger than ever and you're standing on a stage she built out of paper. But I didn't. I'll be there, Dad. Good. He hung up. No goodbye. Just the click of a man who'd said what he came to say and didn't need a response. I walked to my desk and opened the drawer. The white envelope was there, under the paper clips, flat and quiet as a held breath. I hadn't decided yet. But Gerald was making the decision easier every time he opened his mouth. I'm not asking you to agree, Thea, he'd said. I'm asking you to behave. 6 days until turkey. I closed the drawer, but I didn't lock it. Wednesday night, the eve of Thanksgiving. Nolan and I sat in his truck outside my apartment building, the engine off, the heater ticking as it cooled. Rain hit the windshield in slow, fat drops that caught the parking lot light and held it for a second before sliding down. I'm not going to start anything, I said. I needed to say it out loud to make it real. But if he stands up and tells everyone I'm the failure, while she's the success, while he's giving away my share of Grandma's trust based on a lie, I can't just eat salad and smile. Nolan didn't answer right away. He had a way of sitting with a question the way most people sit with coffee, holding it, letting it cool, not rushing to drink. "Then don't," he said. Quiet. The rain. "What do you need?" he asked. I thought about it. Really thought. Not the panicked late-night kind of thinking, but the clear kind. The kind that comes when someone you trust gives you room. "I need the refinance record in my purse. I need you next to me. And I need to not throw up between now and tomorrow." He almost smiled. "I can help with 2 of those." I called Ruth. Not to tell her about the refinance. I still wasn't ready for that conversation. Just to hear her voice. "Are you sure you want to come, Grandma?" "I've been sitting out my son's mistakes for 30 years, Thea. I'm done sitting." After we hung up, I went inside, opened my work bag, and took out the white envelope. I held it in my hands, feeling the weight of it. Not much, physically. A few sheets of paper. Public records. Things anyone could find. But in that envelope was the distance between who my sister said she was and who she actually was, measured in $340,000. I put it in my everyday purse, right next to my phone, where I could feel it against my hip. Then I made the salad. Mixed greens, candied pecans, dried cranberries, a vinaigrette I'd learned from Ruth. Nothing adventurous. Exactly what Marlene ordered. I wasn't bringing a weapon. I was bringing a receipt. And a very good salad. I woke at 5 on Thanksgiving morning because my body decided sleep was finished, regardless of what my brain wanted. The apartment was dark except for the hood light over the stove, which I'd forgotten to turn off. It gave the kitchen a yellowish underwater glow. Copper was asleep at the foot of the bed, curled tight, his tail over his nose. I made coffee, stood at the counter, drank it black. The purse was on the chair by the door where I'd left it. The envelope inside. I could feel its presence from across the room like a low hum, the way you feel a phone vibrating in another room. You can't hear it, but you know it's happening. I pulled the envelope out, read the refinance filing again, though I'd memorized it by now. Deed of trust. Cash out refinance. $340,000. Recorded August 14th. Craig A. Holt and Marlene E. Holt. The type was plain, bureaucratic, uninterested in drama. Just facts, filed in order, by people whose job was to write things down. I put it back in the purse. Then I took it out and set it on the counter. Gerald was my father. He was wrong. About the money, about Marlene, about me. But he was still my father. If I said something at that table, in front of everyone, he would never forgive me. Not for being right. For being right in public. I might win the argument and lose the family. I left the envelope on the counter. I got dressed. I did my makeup. Light. The way I always did. Nothing that said I'm preparing for battle. I brushed my hair. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw a woman who had paid her own rent for 12 years and had never lied about it. Then Gerald's text came through. The family group chat. A photo of Marlene's dining table. White cloth, china, crystal glasses catching the morning light. Caption. The table's set. Proud of my girl. My girl. Singular. One daughter. The other one was bringing salad. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up the envelope, slid it into my purse. I put on my coat. I picked up the salad. And I walked out the door with the envelope against my hip, exactly where I could feel it, the whole drive over. Nolan drove. He'd offered, and I'd said yes without thinking, because my hands weren't interested in steering that morning. The salad sat in my lap, the bowl cold through the plastic wrap, and the envelope sat in my purse on the floor between my feet. The road to Marlene's ran through 2 miles of harvested cornfields, just stubble now, rows of cut stalks poking out of the frozen dirt like tiny monuments to things that used to be tall. The sky was the color of old wool, low and heavy, and the light coming through had that flat November quality that made everything look honest, like the world had stopped trying to impress anyone. We didn't talk for the first 10 minutes. The radio was on low. Some country station Nolan kept tuned. A woman's voice singing about going home. We listened without commenting, the way you listen to rain. Then Nolan said, "You know, my dad never compared me to anyone. He just didn't show up. I think yours shows up too much. In the wrong way." I looked at him. His profile against the gray sky, jaw set, hands easy on the wheel. "That might be the wisest thing you've ever said." "Don't get used to it." I smiled. It was small, and it didn't last, but it was real. The cornfields gave way to subdivisions, newer houses, vinyl siding, basketball hoops in driveways. Then older streets, bigger trees, the kind of neighborhood where people had been paying property taxes long enough to feel superior about it. Orchard Lane was 3 turns from the highway. When we pulled onto Marlene Street, I saw Ruth's old Buick already parked at the curb. She'd come early. "Good." "She's here," I said. Nolan nodded. "Good." He squeezed my hand once, brief, firm, the way you'd test a joint to make sure it was solid, and let go. Then he put the truck in park and turned off the engine. The Colonial sat there in the gray morning, white paint and red door, the sugar maple bare now, its branches reaching up like they were trying to hand something to the sky. Smoke came from the chimney, warm light in every window. "Whatever happens in there," Nolan said, unbuckling, "we're leaving together, and I'm not fixing their deck railing." I grabbed the salad. I grabbed my purse. And we walked up the flagstone path. The front door opened before I knocked. Marlene, in an apron and pearl earrings, a combination that struck me as very curated. "Thea, happy Thanksgiving. Come in, come in." The house smelled like roasting turkey, sage, and something sweet. Those vanilla candles Marlene kept on every flat surface, as if the house needed a signature scent. The dining room table was set for 14. White linen, the good china with the gold rim, crystal glasses, cloth napkins folded into little bishop's hats. A centerpiece of dried flowers and miniature pumpkins ran down the middle like a magazine had exploded tastefully. Everything perfectly arranged, like evidence in a case that hadn't been tried yet. Gerald was in the living room, standing by the fireplace with a glass of red wine he hadn't started drinking yet. He hugged me, quick, one pat on the back, the kind of hug that satisfies obligation without risking warmth. Then he hugged Marlene, longer, both arms, a little rock side to side. "The house looks beautiful, sweetheart." "Thanks, Daddy." I set the salad on the kitchen counter and scanned the room. Craig was by the bar cart pouring sparkling cider for Emma and Jake. He shook Nolan's hand. I watched the handshake. Craig's palm was damp. Nolan noticed. I noticed Nolan notice. His fingers flexed once after he let go, the way you do when you've touched something unexpectedly wet. Ruth sat in the corner of the living room in a wingback chair, a cup of tea in her hands, watching the room with the quiet focus of a woman keeping count. Her eyes found mine across the crowded foyer. She nodded. Once. Small. Like a period at the end of a sentence she'd been composing all morning. Doris, Gerald's younger sister, arrived with her husband Frank and their 3 grown kids, filling the house with the noise of coats being hung and cheeks being kissed, and someone asking where the bathroom was. 14 people. The table was full. I hung my coat on the rack by the door, my purse on the hook beneath it. The envelope was inside, and I could feel its weight even from across the room, the way you feel a word on the tip of your tongue. Not spoken yet, but ready. Everything in that house cost something. I just didn't know yet how much. We sat down to eat at 2:00. Gerald had arranged the seating. Of course he had. With himself at the head, Marlene to his right, Craig beside her, Ruth at the far end, and me between Nolan and Cousin Derek, who spent most of the meal talking about his truck's suspension. I was placed where Gerald could see me but wouldn't have to address me. A spectator seat. Front row. No microphone. The turkey was carved. Sides were passed. Cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cornbread, the salad I'd brought. Marlene placed it at the far end of the table near Ruth, as far from the turkey as geometry allowed. I noticed. I let it go. For 20 minutes, it was just a meal. Forks on china, glasses clinking, the kids arguing about who got the drumstick. Doris told a story about Frank getting lost on the way to a pumpkin patch. People laughed. The candles flickered. For 20 minutes, I could almost believe this was a normal family doing a normal thing. Then Gerald pushed back his chair and stood up. He tapped his wine glass with a butter knife, a clear, bright ring that cut through the conversation like a bell. The table went quiet in sections, the way a room quiets during a storm warning, one pocket of silence spreading until it covered everything. "Before we eat dessert," he said, "I want to say a few words." He looked around the table, at Doris, at Frank, at the cousins, at Ruth. His eyes passed over me the way headlights pass over a mailbox. Then they landed on Marlene, and he smiled. "I've spent my life building things. Houses mostly. But the thing I'm proudest of is this family. And nobody in this family has made me prouder than Marlene." Marlene put her hand on her chest, right on cue. "Your sister has done something most people never do," Gerald continued. And now he was looking at me. Not beside me, not near me, at me. "She paid off her house before 40. She built a family, a home, a life." He raised his glass. "Your sister's paid off her house. Unlike someone at this table. 14 people, 14 pairs of eyes, and every single one of them found me." I smiled. I picked up my fork. I took a bite of turkey. The turkey was dry. I chewed it slowly, giving myself time. Gerald was still standing, glass raised, waiting for the room to do what rooms did when he spoke. Agree with him. Nod. Raise their glasses too. Let the moment harden into family history. Gerald, the father, honoring the daughter who earned it. The other daughter chewing quietly. I swallowed. I set my fork down, and I turned to Craig. "Craig, can you pass me the turkey?" I said. My voice was even, polite, the voice I used at closings when I needed a notary to recheck a signature. "And while you're at it, how's the 340 refinance going?" Craig's fork hit the china. The sound was small, a metallic clink against porcelain, a single note. But in the silence that followed, it filled the room like a church bell. His hand was still in the air where the fork had been, fingers open, frozen. Marlene said, "What?" Too fast. The word came out before she could shape it. It wasn't a question. It was a reflex. The sound a person makes when a door opens that was supposed to stay locked. Gerald lowered his glass. "What are you talking about?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand up. I stayed in my seat, napkin in my lap, the way I'd sat through 100 closings where someone's paperwork didn't add up. "The cash-out refinance," I said. $340,000. Filed with the county recorder last August. It's a public record, Dad. Anyone can look it up. Craig set what was left of his grip on the table. His hands were flat on the cloth now, like he was bracing for something. He looked at Marlene. Not the look of a man caught off guard, but the look of a man who'd been waiting for this earthquake since the foundation cracked. "Marlene, stop," he said. Quiet. Almost a whisper. But Marlene wasn't stopping. That's our private business." "You made it family business," I said. "When Dad gave you $80,000 to pay off a mortgage that was never paid off." Gerald's face went through 4 seasons in 6 seconds. Confusion, calculation, realization. And then something I hadn't expected. Fear. Not of me. Of being wrong. Of having built his pedestal on someone else's lie. "Ruth," at the far end of the table, set her teacup down. She didn't say a word. She just watched her son. Marlene stood up. Her chair scraped against the hardwood. A sharp, ugly sound, like a gasp the floor made on her behalf. "This is ridiculous," she said, and her voice had that high, pressed quality of someone inflating a balloon they know is about to pop. "Thea is making things up because she's jealous. She's always been jealous." "Sit down, Marlene." Gerald's voice was low. Not angry yet. Confused. A man looking at a blueprint that didn't match the building. He turned to Craig. "Is this true? The refinance?" Craig didn't look at Marlene. That was the thing I noticed. The thing the whole table noticed. He didn't look at his wife. He looked at his hands. Then he nodded. "The 80,000 I gave you," Gerald said. "For the mortgage. Where did it go?" "Daddy, I can explain." "Where did it go?" The room had gone perfectly still. Emma and Jake sat with their forks suspended, not understanding but sensing. Doris quietly put her hand on Frank's arm. Cousin Derek stopped mid-chew. Craig spoke. His voice cracked on the first word, then steadied, like a man stepping onto ice that held. "The business," he said. "The store. We were hemorrhaging money. We used the 80 to keep it open another 4 months. Then we refinanced the house." He closed his eyes for a second. "It didn't work. The store closed in January." Doris stood, murmured something gentle to Emma and Jake, and walked them out of the dining room. Their footsteps on the stairs were the only sound for a long moment. Small sneakers on hardwood, going up, fading. Gerald sat down, slowly, the way a man sits when the floor has shifted and he's no longer sure the chair is where he left it. His wine glass was still in his hand. He hadn't taken a single sip. Then Ruth spoke. "Gerald." Her voice was quiet, the way water is quiet before it finds the crack. "That 80,000 was from my trust, for both my granddaughters. You had no right to give it all to one." Gerald looked at his mother. I saw something pass across his face that I'd never seen there before. Not shame, exactly, but proximity to it. The look of a man who'd been so certain he was holding a hammer that he hadn't noticed he'd been holding a mirror. He didn't answer. For the first time in 63 years, Gerald Exton did not have the last word. I stood up. Slowly. Not dramatically. I wasn't performing. I just needed to be standing for what I was about to say. The way you stand when you're leaving a room you don't plan to come back to the same way. I looked at Gerald. He was still in his chair, wine glass untouched, eyes fixed somewhere between the turkey platter and something only he could see. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone, Dad. I came because you invited me." My voice didn't waver. I was surprised by that. I'd expected trembling, expected my throat to close up the way it always did around Gerald. That automatic smallness, like my body had memorized its role before I was old enough to object. But something had shifted. The smallness was gone, not replaced by anger, replaced by clearness. But I am done sitting at a table where I'm the punchline to someone else's lie. Gerald opened his mouth. "Thea," then closed it. The word sat between us like a coin someone had dropped and neither of us picked up. I looked at Marlene. She was still standing, but the performance had drained out of her posture. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, not defeated, not apologetic, just exposed. Like a house with the curtains pulled back and the lights on. "I don't hate you," I said to her. "I just want you to stop." I didn't say stop what. She knew. I picked up my purse from the hook by the door. Nolan was already standing, jacket in hand. He nodded at the table, polite, unhurried, the nod of a man who'd been raised right and didn't need to prove it by making a scene. Ruth spoke from her chair. "Thea." I stopped. "Come by tomorrow, I'll make tea. We have things to discuss." She looked at Gerald. "About the trust. All of us." I nodded. Then Nolan and I walked to the door. I didn't slam it. I just closed it. There's a difference. A slam is for the audience. A close is for yourself. Outside, the November air hit my face like cold water. The sky had gone dark early, the way it does in late November, and the porch light threw a circle of yellow on the flagstones. I could smell wet leaves and something sweet. Pie, cooling on a windowsill somewhere. Someone else's Thanksgiving. Nolan opened the truck door for me. I sat down and put the envelope, still sealed, still unopened, on the dashboard. I hadn't needed to show them the paper. The question had been enough. I stood on my sister's porch that night, and the air smelled like wet leaves and cold pie. I'd asked one question, and it had cost me a Thanksgiving dinner. But it bought me something I'd been paying for my whole life, the right to stop pretending. If you've ever walked out of a room and felt lighter, not heavier, you know exactly what I mean. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. The next part is the quiet part, and sometimes that's the part that matters most. I woke up the next morning and, for 3 full seconds, didn't remember. Then it came back, not as a rush, but as a settling, like snow landing on a surface that was ready for it. The apartment was quiet. Copper was on my chest, one paw curled under his chin, his purr vibrating through my ribs. The overhead light was off. Nolan had turned it off sometime in the night. He was in the kitchen now. I could hear the coffee maker doing its slow, percussive work and the soft clink of a spoon against a mug. I lay there for a while. The ceiling had a hairline crack that ran from the light fixture to the corner. I'd noticed it the day I moved in and had looked at it so many times since that it felt like punctuation. A line drawn by the building itself, marking time. Nolan appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs. He handed me one and sat on the edge of the bed. We drank without talking. The coffee was strong, and the light through the window was softer than yesterday's. A Friday after Thanksgiving light, pale and unhurried, like the world had exhaled. "How do you feel?" he asked. I thought about it, really considered it, the way I'd consider a document at work. Reading every line, checking for what was actually there versus what I wanted to be there. "Like I just put down something I've been carrying for 20 years, I said, "and my arms don't know what to do yet." He nodded. He understood carrying things. My phone was on the nightstand, 4 missed calls from Gerald, 0 from Marlene, 1 text from Ruth. 10 a.m., my kitchen. Bring Nolan if you want. I didn't call Gerald back. Not yet. There would be time for that, or there wouldn't. Either way, it would happen on my terms now, not his. I looked at the bookshelf Nolan had built. The first book was still slightly tilted from where I'd placed it too quickly. The covered bridge book. I could see Copper's paw prints in the thin layer of sawdust that had settled on the top shelf. The relationship with Gerald would never be what it was. Maybe it would be something else. Maybe it would be nothing. But the version where I was the punchline, where I sat at the foot of the table and smiled while someone read my verdict, that version was over. It had ended with a fork hitting china and 6 seconds of silence. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Like closing a book you should have put down at chapter 3. Ruth's kitchen at 10 in the morning smelled like Earl Grey and something baking. Scones, maybe, or biscuits. Something simple and flour-dusted that required no ceremony. The wooden clock ticked its approximate time. The same violet-rimmed teacups sat on the table. But today, there were 3. Gerald was already there. He sat at the small table with his hands around a mug he wasn't drinking from. He looked older than he had 20 hours ago. Not dramatically. It wasn't movie aging, hair gone white overnight. It was subtler. His shoulders sat lower. His jaw had loosened from its usual set position, like a bolt that had been over-tightened for years and had finally stripped. Ruth stood at the counter, her back to us, pouring hot water into the pot. She didn't turn around when I came in. She didn't need to. She knew who was there. Sit down, Thea. I sat. Nolan waited in the living room, close enough if I needed him, far enough to give us the room. Ruth brought the pot to the table and poured 3 cups. Then she sat, smoothed her hands on the tablecloth, and spoke. I called my lawyer this morning. I'm revoking Gerald as trustee. I'll be appointing an independent trustee for whatever's left of the fund. Gerald's jaw tightened. Mama, you took money meant for both my granddaughters and gave it to one. Based on a lie. That's not parenting, Gerald. That's picking favorites with someone else's money. The clock ticked. Steam rose from the teacups. Ruth looked at me. Your share will be restored. It won't be 80,000. The fund needs time to recover. But it'll be yours, as I intended. I nodded. I didn't say thank you. It felt wrong to thank someone for returning what should never have been taken. Gerald looked at me then. His eyes were red but dry. He hadn't cried. Gerald didn't cry, except for Marlene's fake mortgage payoff apparently. The irony was so thick I could have spread it on toast. You could have told me, he said. His voice was low, raw, before everyone. You could have asked me how I was doing, I said, before telling everyone I was failing. He blinked, looked down, and then he nodded, small, almost invisible, the kind of nod that costs a man like Gerald everything. Ruth poured more tea. 3 cups. Nobody reached for the sugar. Nobody needed to sweeten this. 3 weeks passed. The world didn't end. It just rearranged itself, the way furniture settles after you move a heavy piece, and everything else has to adjust to the new space. I went back to work. Ridgeline Title was mercifully indifferent to family drama. The files didn't care who'd ruined Thanksgiving. Diane looked at me Monday morning with her glasses halfway down her nose and said, So, was it your sister? I stared at her. Honey, I've been in title work for 22 years. I knew the moment you went quiet that day. You don't go quiet for strangers. I didn't confirm or deny. She patted my arm, handed me a coffee, and went back to her desk. That was the whole conversation. Diane understood discretion the way surgeons understand sterile fields. It wasn't optional, it was structural. Marlene texted once. 5 words. I'm sorry you found out that way. Not sorry for lying. Not sorry for taking the money. Sorry I found out. I read it twice, then set the phone down. I didn't respond. There wasn't a response that would do any good. She wasn't apologizing. She was managing. Craig called. Awkward, short, his voice stripped of that salesman warmth. For what it's worth, I wanted to come clean a year ago. She wouldn't let me. I know, I said. How? Because you couldn't look me in the eye at a single Sunday brunch. Silence, then, yeah. Take care of your kids, Craig. That was it. We didn't become friends, but I stopped holding him in the same folder as Marlene. He was weak where she was calculated. Different sins. Gerald called once, also short, also stripped. Ruth's changing the trust paperwork. I suppose you know that. I do. A pause so long I checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. You're a lot like your grandmother, he said finally. That wasn't always a compliment from me, but maybe it should have been. He hung up before I could respond. Gerald didn't do vulnerable for more than 15 seconds at a time, but he'd said it, and I'd heard it. And that small, strange sentence sat in my chest like a seed I wasn't sure would grow, but wasn't willing to throw away. Nolan finished the second shelf that weekend. This one was for cookbooks. Copper immediately claimed the top shelf, nudging a copy of Julia Child aside with his head to make room. The first snow came on a Tuesday. Light, non-committal, the kind that melts by noon but reminds you something's changing. Christmas Eve. Ruth's house. Not Marlene's colonial, not Gerald's split level. Ruth's kitchen, the one with the arm's reach efficiency and the clock that kept its own time. The table was set for 4. Ruth, Thea, Nolan, and Doris, who had called me 2 days after Thanksgiving and said, "I should have said something years ago. I'm saying it now. I'm on your side." She'd said it plainly, without drama, in the tone of a woman hanging a picture she'd been meaning to hang for a decade. Ruth made a roasted chicken, smaller than Thanksgiving's turkey, seasoned with rosemary and lemon. The skin crackled golden in her old Dutch oven. No china with gold rims, no crystal glasses. She used the stoneware set she'd had for 40 years, blue-rimmed, slightly chipped on the edges, heavy enough to mean something. There were no speeches, no toasts, no announcements. Nolan carved. Doris poured wine. Ruth brought out the biscuits. I tossed a salad. A good one, because I'm good at salads. And there was nobody here who'd use that against me. I looked down at my place at the table. Ruth had set out handwritten place cards, actual cardstock, cut with scissors, our names in her cursive. Her handwriting shook a little now, the letters leaning slightly right, like they were walking into a wind. But every letter was there, clear and deliberate. My card sat at the seat closest to the kitchen. I asked her why. "That's where the family sits," she said, "close enough to help, close enough to be fed first." I ran my thumb across my name. The ink was still slightly raised. She'd used a fountain pen, the old one she kept in the junk drawer next to the rubber bands and expired coupons. The T in Thea had a little curl at the top, like a wave. Outside, snow fell. Real snow this time, not the non-committal kind, but the heavy, staying kind that changes the shape of everything it touches. The candles on the table were beeswax, not vanilla. They smelled like warmth without trying to. Last Thanksgiving, my father raised his glass and told everyone I was the failure. His fork was steady. His voice was certain. He had no idea he was standing on a lie. This Christmas, my grandmother set a table for 4. She didn't make a toast. She didn't need to. I used to think belonging meant being chosen. I was wrong. It meant choosing where to sit. That's my story. The turkey got cold, the lie got exposed, and I learned that a question asked calmly can hit harder than any door you slam. If this story reminded you of your own Thanksgiving table, your own silence, your own moment of choosing, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and tap that button now. There's a story in the description I think you need to hear next. Until then, set your own table. You've earned it.